Listen, we work entirely too hard for us to have our podcast collect digital dust, okay? We're putting in all this energy into every single episode. We're splicing it up. We're creating all these social media edits, all of the things. The answer is not doing more, rather, search engine optimization. And it's one of the hills, I'm not going to die on it, but it's one of the hills that I'll live on, okay? Here's the thing. You do not need any more social media clips. Splice that episode up. I promise you there's at least 6 different episode clips that you can pull from the episode that you just recorded. Each episode that I record, I actually pull at least 12 different clips from it. Literally 12. Because at least 6 goes to the guests and at least another 5 to 6 go to me. Okay? So you don't need anything more. You don't need more blog posts, none of that. However, you do need to engage in strategic search engine optimization. And I did a workshop on this for a group of ladies. It was a all women podcasting networking group. And I wanted to be able to share that information to you. Don't talk to me about the angles that are going to be in here. I tried to get as many attention grabby angles as possible. We recorded it on Google Meet. Thank you, Tahjma, for hitting record on that. But I want to make sure that you get this information, okay? Because it seemed like it was helpful for them. I'm sure it'll be helpful for you. So what you're about to listen to is all of the information as it relates to how SEO connects with podcasting and why that matters. Because we can record all the things, but we need to make sure it's found. 2 of the most important aspects of podcast SEO or content SEO, that being the title and your show notes, the most important things. Why keywords are more than buzzwords. This is how your audience is talking, so you need to position yourself in a way that they can find you. Boosting your discoverability using your website, your LinkedIn, your email, and yes, even thumbnails, okay? If you're on the email list, I sent this to you most immediately without a thumbnail. Forgive me. And then we're also talking about repurposing that content strategically, which is all a part of search engine optimization. Notice I said repurposing, not creating new pieces of content. It's all the same episode. We just want to have it look slightly different every time it gets in front of somebody. All right, so I don't have to hope that you're going to find this valuable because I really, really, really know that you will, okay? Look forward to talking to you on the other end because we're going to end with a faith note, okay? Bye. Cool. So one of the first 2 examples that I always go to is our searchable titles and our descriptions. Looking at our titles first, I always love to point out these 2 podcasts were in the top 100 podcasts in the business category for the entirety of 2024. And I go off of that just because we don't have any firm data on 2025 just yet. And Dare to Lead with Brene Brown was a really, really good example of that because that podcast did not launch a single episode until the spring of last year. And it was 2 years old. So our titles would need to be super, super searchable. Here's what I mean by that. When you're looking at Brene Brown's, we talk about America Ferrera. Does everybody know who that is? Or can you think of who that is? And if you don't readily know who that is, it's actually Ugly Betty. But we can't put Ugly Betty's name in a title that has nothing to do with the show itself. So what Brene Brown's team put in there is, we know that America Ferrera's name is searchable. We know that identity and integrated leadership are 2 keywords that Brene Brown's audience really care about. If you think about identity, if you think about leadership and emotional intelligence, 9 times out of 10, you're going to think about Brene Brown. So those 2 keywords were plugged into that title spot. Then we also have the example of Money Rehab. Now, this podcast did not drop, from what I saw, from the top 10 podcasts in the business category, for the entirety of 2024. That's specifically because she did two things, or her podcast team did two things. One, using the keywords investing advice and Warren Buffett. Anybody who's going to think about financial freedom or anything in relation to that, 9 times out of 10, Warren Buffett comes up. Investing comes up. All of these different keywords are being put into that title. And then we're also going to think about what questions are our listeners looking to answer. Now we have to tiptoe in this area a little bit, because sometimes the question that we're putting as our title is actually the question that we think our people should be asking, not the question that they are actually asking. And I'm going to cover how you can look up some of your keywords without having to do a whole certification in search engine optimization. The example that I pulled from Money Rehab is, should I sell my house to be more financially free? This is an actual question that people are looking up when it comes to financial freedom. Then we have 2 other examples. We want to make sure our show notes are super, super optimized for this as well. Diary of a CEO and The Journey with Morgan DeBon, though these 2 were also 2 additional podcasts that did not drop, with the exception of The Journey. I think The Journey hit like the top 200, 300 podcasts in the business category in 2024. But Diary of a CEO did not drop below the top 20 in that category. And it's particularly because, yes, we have our keywords. Now we need to put those keywords in place in our title, as well as in our show description. So in those first 200 characters of your show notes, that's where you're going to put those keywords again. Diary of a CEO, put them here as well. So divorce, marriages. You see divorce, you see marriages in the title. It's being replicated in those show notes over and over again. And the other example that I like to bring into it is in the Journey podcast with Morgan DeBon is a really good example of this. Is you want to make sure that you're linking people to your website or to guest websites. Now, it's a whole lot of work to go from idea to recording to editing. And then now I also have to add show notes. Now I also have to figure out what the title is. And sometimes we get a little lazy when it comes to our show notes. Reasonably so, because we've already spent so much time and effort into these sections. But we want to make sure that we're keeping it going in those show notes. And one of the easiest ways that you can do that is, like I mentioned, SEO starts with your website. Add your website link and add your guest website link, because that teaches algorithms that this content is useful. This content is perfect over here, and I can trust it to push it out to other people and to push that through to other people who are looking up things in relation to scaling a salon space. People who are looking up divorce lawyer James Sexton. All of this is about trusting the algorithm, or the algorithm being able to trust us, really. So before we get into how we're looking up our keywords, I'm going to give you an example of why this matters so much, okay? So Knock Knock Hi is the man in the picture he's a doctor. I want to say it's a type of doctor that I cannot remember how to pronounce, but he does stuff with the eyes. And the woman on the right is his wife. And they have created this podcast around how are we being medical advocates for people who are in the profession, but then also the families that are a part of that. And a part of that is we want to make sure that we're getting in front of those specific people. So the example that I'm pulling is this episode that they did with a woman by the name of Dr. Betsy Grunch. Now, Dr. Betsy Grunch has a little bit of her own presence on YouTube specifically. What I did is I was looking for what are some topics, what are some phrases that are out there that I can put under this title, that I can name as a title. If you ever look at some of the pop culture titles, a lot of times you'll see that they'll just make lists of keywords rather than forming an entire phrase or an entire sentence. That's really, they're just putting the keywords where the keywords need to be so that search engines, again, can find what they're looking for. So the keyword here that really did it for them is women surgeons, which was funny because I cannot pronounce what this lady did for a profession. It's something in the medical field. But we wanted to be able to have it be findable for the layman's person. Women surgeons is searchable. People in the medical field are also thinking about how much time they're spending at work. So we plugged in the 80-hour work week. She also mentioned something about toxicity in the medical field. So we plugged in all of those keywords in a specific order based upon what the search volume was. To the point where within 6 days of posting that specific episode, they had as many views on that one post, within 3 days, they had as many views on that one video as they had on the several videos that they posted in the last six days. So what took them 6 days to do took literally half the time because we worked together to optimize these specific keywords. And now that's what this first image is. So it went to 1.8 thousand views. And now I checked today, and this is still the highest performing video that they had on their channel within the last 9 months, because this is a video that we spent specific time optimizing it and putting those keywords in place. Now there's a short end of the stick that comes in here. And I found out some interesting information when I did this specific video. Unfortunately, when we're using keywords related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, the data says that those do not perform well. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be talking about those specific things, but I am saying there's a little bit more work that we have to do in order to figure out how to make that happen. The Betsy video and Joelle's video went out week to week. Not to mention, it was not a great timing because this was put out on election day. Not the best timing to put that specific episode out, but that's what they decided to do. So with this one, Joelle actually has more of a presence online than Betsy did. I can't remember exactly how many subscribers he ended up having, but his presence is greater than Betsy from a numbers perspective, but it did not perform as well. And I'm bringing that up to say, one, we have to make sure that we're not relying on our guests' names and the topic that we're searching for, or the viral topic that we're searching for, because that doesn't mean that it's going to end up being viral or that it's going to end up getting in front of the specific people that we want to get it in front of. But then two, get a little crafty about how you're using specific keywords. Here, I learned clearly the hard way. I should not be using diversifying the medical fields, because on election day, nobody cares about that. But then two, it just does not perform well. So there's you have to be open to kind of playing around and dancing with your keywords and figuring out what is going to perform well. This is very much a data's game. So if you're going to think about doing your own keywords, the best thing, without having to go again get certified in search engine optimization, the best thing that you can do is understand your audience better than anybody else. Better than that algorithm understands your audience, because no one does. One of the things I consistently do is, if I'm on some kind of sales call or if I'm doing some kind of conversation where I can record it, I'm going to record that conversation, because then that tells me I have a transcript that I can send into AI and offer this specific prompt. Based on this transcript, what are 10 phrases or problems that come up repeatedly? And then highlight anything that sounds emotional, specific, or like something someone would type into a search bar. Because then I can go back. That's how we came up with this. Should I sell my house to be more financially free? Those are actual words that people are using to search up that specific piece of content. Is anybody using AI in order to do search engine optimization, or have you tiptoed around AI at all? Okay, does that feel, if you were to put that prompt into there, would that feel like, oh, I can I'm interested to see what this would give me. Awesome. This is going to, again, give you the titles that you need in order to select the angle that you're coming from. This example that I gave you, I did not know Joel's brand enough in order to position him specifically. But for us, we know our own brand, or for the podcast that we're working on, we know our clients' brands well enough to know what phrasings we need to put into place, from the show notes to the title as well. Cool. So here are 3 things that we don't know go into search engine optimization. And this actually hits on a little bit of what Gina does as well with repurposing content. So watch time matters because, one, a view on YouTube, I think, counts for, one view is for somebody watching 30 seconds, I believe. And then I think one view on a platform like TikTok is like 3 seconds. That matters with how much time somebody's watching your stuff. So if you're being able to see on the platform that somebody's watching your content, that is perfect. That, again, tells search engines, tells YouTube, tells Apple Podcasts, whatever platform you're putting this on, that this is a valuable piece of content, not because I think it is, but because the data is showing us that it's valuable. And one of the sneaky ways that I actually do about to up the watch time is, whenever you're putting out a podcast episode, double it as a blog post or like a LinkedIn newsletter and link them to exactly what portion of that episode is that write-up is about. So if the episode is about how women are taking over golfing in 2025, and the blog post or the LinkedIn newsletter is about how do you set up the best, the bag that people are wearing. Hopefully y'all know what I'm talking about. The bag, the golf club bag, that thing. How do you set that up in the most strategic way so it's not super heavy? If that's only a 2-minute section, I'm going to make the blog post or make the LinkedIn newsletter about that, and then I'm going to link it to that specific 5 minutes and 37 seconds is where that specific portion started. Because that helps us with our watch time being able to be findable. Then the other portion is thumbnails. Now, I give this example, and this is not the best thumbnail that you can offer, but this thumbnail here performed the best out of all of Gary Miles's content because it gave a visual representation of what the title was and what the episode was about. If you're scrolling through YouTube, and I use YouTube as an example just because it's easier for people to think about those views because you can see the views right then and there. If you're scrolling through YouTube, you're going to stop and look at that because that sends an emotional trigger for you. So your thumbnails would need to be an emotional trigger. It needs to be scroll stopping. And then the wording that you're deciding to use on it is what's helpful for people to understand, okay, I emotionally connected with this. I stopped to scroll on it. Now what is this actually about? Which plays a role in, again, watch time and people being able to find your content. So search engines aren't necessarily reading the thumbnails, but they're able to, it boosts you up essentially. It's like your little highlight reel. Another portion of your highlight reel is our teaser content. And I pulled these 2 examples for Gary Miles out. This is where you want to play around. This is where I mentioned Gina is a good example of this because she does a really good job of putting video with the podcast. We want to play around with how people are going to digest information, even when it's a topic that might be super, might be a little bland, might be more helpful than it is clickbaity. So with Gary, we keep playing around back and forth between he's up here talking, but then let me give you some B-roll. What does it look like if we set up a green screen situation? For every 3 views that showed up here on his YouTube shorts, those people transferred into the views on his actual podcast episode. So that plays a role in us being able to be findable. Watch time, thumbnails, as well as teaser content. And teaser content is shorts as well as reels. All right. I think that might be all the things. Okay. In the comments of the YouTube video, I think you can also comment on Spotify. I always am about to say Shopify. Spotify. Let me know what was most useful and most impactful for you when you listened to this episode. Okay? When you went through all that workshop, what are you taking away and you're saying, I didn't know I needed that. I'm going to take that with me. Let me know. So this faith note, for anybody who this is your first time listening, we do a faith note every single time there is a episode. We end with it because this podcast and the business behind this podcast, iMoves Management, is very much founded in the Bible verse, Matthew 17:20. If you have the faith of even just a mustard seed, you can tell that mountain to move from here to there. And I don't know about you, but it takes a whole lot of faith to be a business owner. We're waking up every single day figuring out how are we going to work alongside God, work alongside our employees, our business partners in order to make this work, in order to share our light with other people. And we end each episode with a little faith note that you can carry out into the world. Okay, so today's faith note is the entire book of Ruth. Okay, if you know anything about the book of Ruth, and I actually heard about this and it blew my mind. Okay, it blew my mind. If you know anything about the book of Ruth, or even if you don't know, I'm sure you heard the joke of I'm waiting for my Boaz. There's three people within the book of Ruth: Boaz, Ruth, and Naomi. Okay. And the main thing that everybody gets from the book of Ruth is how Ruth and Boaz end up married. And we take that and run with it. Everyone wants to say that's what the book is about. Here's a perspective shift. Okay. What if the book of Ruth is actually about Naomi? What if the book of Ruth is actually about Naomi and the favor that she has and how that favor extends to everyone around her across generations? Ruth is staying with Naomi. She's submitting to Naomi's wisdom, submitting to Naomi's leadership, following everything that Naomi tells her to do, to the point of it leads Ruth and Boaz to each other. All of this is rooted in Naomi has so much favor, and she is a leader in her own right. We always say that leaders look like a very specific thing. If you go back and read the book of Ruth, I promise you, it's going to blow your mind because it blew mine. Okay. So my point here is, what does it look like for you to share your light with other people? And more specifically, for you to share your light in a way where it's clear that you know and understand that what you're doing, what you're saying is not only for you. We do not have businesses only for ourselves. We do not create businesses only to be able to employ ourselves. It is to create impact, to solve problems, to share the favor that we have with other people. Every single thing that we say and do is going to be to the glory of God, one, but then two, someone else is going to be able to utilize that. And I think that is such a powerful aspect of this. And I just had to share that with somebody else. Read the book of Ruth. I read it years ago, and then I heard this person talking about it, and it changed the game for me. Changed the game. It's only 4 or 5 chapters, so easy read, but there's so much more there than marriage. All right. I will talk to y'all in the next episode. Bye. Okay. Editing Tahjma one more time. Me and the tiny microphone are back. You ever feel like you're showing up on podcasts, putting out all these episodes on different people's podcast episodes, your own podcast, creating content, but it's not really doing much for your business? Yeah, it's visibility, but it's
is it actually leading to deeper relationships? Is it actually growing your audience? Are clients actually ready to sign on the dotted line because they listen to your podcast? That's exactly what we figure out in a podcast strategy session. In 1 hour, we build a clear return on investment driven plan to make sure every interview or episode moves your business forward. Want to see if this is the right move for you? Schedule a coffee chat using a link in the description. All right, back to the episode. You've been listening to Coffee Chats podcast from iMoves Management, a marketing agency serving small business owners. This episode was written, hosted, produced, and edited by me, Tahjma VanBuren. If you want to learn more about anything you heard on the show, schedule your coffee chat using the link in the description. We'll talk all things podcasting and how to use it as a true marketing strategy for you and your small business. Go to imovesmanagement.com for further information. Thank you to our listeners for supporting the show. Bye.